My name is Amanda Sullivan, and I've been a rookie officer with the Boston Police Department for only 3 months. I still remember the day I received my badge, shiny and full of promise. My father, James Sullivan, has been a captain in the same department for over 30 years. A legend among officers and a man hard to impress, especially when it comes to his only daughter. It all began on a seemingly ordinary Friday morning. The Boston sky was gray, as usual in late October. The air had that moisture that precedes snow, but not yet cold enough to freeze. I was in the women's locker room, adjusting my uniform for the 3rd time that morning. "Sullivan?" Sergeant Dawson's voice echoed down the hallway. "In my office now." My heart raced. Had I done something wrong? For the past few weeks, I'd been assigned mostly administrative duties or basic neighborhood patrols. Nothing that would have gotten me into trouble. "Yes, sir," I replied, quickly adjusting my tactical belt as I headed to his office. Sergeant Dawson was a burly man with a gray mustache and eyes that seemed to see through any lie. He was sitting behind his desk, leafing through some papers when I entered. "Sullivan, I have a new assignment for you today." He didn't even look up. Patrol at the Prudential Center. The Prudential Center was one of Boston's largest shopping malls, a massive complex with luxury shops, restaurants, and offices. It wasn't exactly the kind of mission I expected, but at least it was something different. "Yes, sir. I'll be there." "Not so fast, rookie." He finally looked at me. "You're not going alone. You're joining Captain Sullivan." "My father?" I swallowed hard. Working with my father was something I'd been avoiding since graduating from the academy. Not because I didn't love or respect him, but because I knew he'd be twice as strict with me as he would be with any other officer. "Understood, sir. He's waiting for you in the garage." "Don't make him wait." Dawson returned to his papers, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. I left his office with a mixture of anxiety and excitement. Working with my father meant I could finally show him that I wasn't just the captain's daughter, but a competent police officer. When I arrived at the garage, my father was already waiting beside a police car, impatiently checking his watch. 3 minutes late, Officer Sullivan. His voice was professional, as if he were speaking to any subordinate. "Sorry, Sergeant. Dawson just informed me of the assignment." He studied me for a moment, his blue eyes, the same as mine, scrutinizing my uniform with military precision. "I understand this is your first patrol at Prudential Center. It's a high-traffic area with lots of blind spots and a variety of potential situations. I hope you're prepared." "Yes, sir. I'm ready." I tried to keep my voice steady, hiding any insecurity. He nodded briefly before getting into the driver's car. "Let's go then." During the drive, he explained the specific procedures for patrolling malls, the routes, the hot spots, the protocols for emergency. I absorbed every word, determined not to make any mistakes. The mall opens at 10 a.m., but we arrived an hour early to check the entrance, emergency exits, and security cameras with the local team. He parked the patrol car in a designated area near the service entrance. "Let's meet with the head of security first." Mark Chun, the Prudential Center's head of security, greeted us. "With coffee and donuts?" a cliché my father waved away. After a brief meeting to discuss the day's highlights, we began our patrol. It was Friday, the opening day of a new electronics store, and the mall management expected a lot of activity. Our job was to ensure everything went smoothly. "Let's split up to cover more ground." My father checked his watch. "You take floors 10 through 15. I'll take the ground floor through the 9th. I was surprised. Was he giving me autonomy? "Are you sure, Captain?" I asked, unable to hide my surprise. A half smile played at the corner of his mouth. "Think you can't do it, officer?" "No, sir. Yes, sir. I can't. Keep your radio on. Check in every 30 minutes. If anything unusual happens, report it to me immediately." "Yes, sir." He turned to leave, but paused for a moment. "And Amanda." He rarely used my first name during service. "I trust your judgment." Those words meant more to me than he could have imagined. With a new sense of confidence, I headed for the elevators to begin my patrol of the upper floors. The mall was still relatively empty, with only employees arriving and a few people who appeared to be early risers eager for the store's opening. I made a full tour of the 10th floor, checking every aisle, every store being prepared for opening. Everything was calm. I reported to my father as instructed and proceeded to the 11th floor. The pattern repeated itself. Routine checks, minor interactions with staff, nothing out of the ordinary. When I reached the 12th floor, I noticed a strange movement. A group of technicians were working on one of the central elevators. Is there a problem? I asked what appeared to be the team leader. Nothing serious, officer. He smiled, adjusting his badge that identified him as Brian from maintenance. Just a routine check before today's big move. I nodded and continued my patrol, but something about the situation bothered me. Maybe it was just the nervousness of being alone on my first serious patrol, or maybe it was that sixth sense my father always said a good cop develops. I decided to go back and check again. The technicians had already finished, and the elevator seemed to be working normally. I asked a few additional questions, wrote down their names, and continued on to the 13th. The 13th floor of the Prudential Center was different from the others. Half of it was occupied by the mall's own executive offices, and the other half housed a luxury dining area that hadn't yet opened. The main hallway was deserted when I stepped off the elevator. My radio crackled. Officer Sullivan report. My father's voice rang out clearly. Floor 13 clear so far, sir. Proceeding with the check. Receive. Movement is increasing on the ground floor. The line for the opening is already forming. Finish your round and come down to reinforce. Yes, sir. I continued my search through the 13th floor, passing the executive office. Most were still empty, with only a few administrative staff starting their day. That's when I heard a strange sound coming from one of the side hallways. It sounded like a muffled argument. Instinctively put my hand on my holster and approached cautiously. Two men were talking urgently near a service door. One of them I recognized as Brian, the maintenance technician I'd seen earlier. The other was wearing an expensive suit and looked irritated. "Everything okay, gentlemen?" I asked, approaching with one hand still close to my gun. They both jumped. The man in the suit quickly composed himself. "Perfectly, officer." He held out his hand. "Marcus Devlin, executive mall manager. Just checking on some last-minute details with the maintenance crew." I accepted his handshake, noticing that his palm was clammy. "Is there a problem with the elevator?" No. He laughed nervously. "Just making sure everything is perfect for today. We have VIPs coming for the new store opening." Brian nodded quickly, avoiding my gaze. "Everything's working perfectly, officer. I just made the final adjustments." Something still didn't feel right, but there was nothing concrete to go on. "I see. Well, I'll be around if you need anything." Sure. Devlin smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Have a good day, officer." I continued my rounds, but kept that interaction in mind. When I finished the 13th floor, I decided to take the same elevator the technicians had been working on to go down. I pressed the button and waited. The elevator arrived with a soft ding. The doors opened, revealing a luxurious interior with mirrors and wood paneling. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the ground floor. The doors closed, and the elevator began its descent. It was between the 10th and 9th floors that everything went wrong. The elevator stopped abruptly, making me stagger. The lights flickered and then settled into a fainter, glowy emergency lights. My training kicked in immediately. I checked the emergency panel and pressed the communication button. "This is Officer Sullivan, Boston Police Department." The elevator stopped between the 10th and 9th floors. "Anyone listening?" Silent. The communication system didn't seem to be working. I grabbed my radio. "Captain Sullivan, this is Officer Sullivan. I'm stuck in the main elevator between floors 10 and 9. The elevator's communication system isn't working. Over. Static." I tried again, adjusting the frequency. Nothing. The signal wasn't getting. I took a deep breath, fighting the onset of panic that threatened to overwhelm me. "Stay calm, Amanda," I told myself. "You've been trained for this." I examined the elevator carefully. It was a modern model with redundant safety systems. In theory, even with a power failure, it should have automatically descended to the nearest floor. The fact that it was stuck between floors suggested a more serious problem. It was then that I noticed something strange. The elevator control panel had a small device attached to it, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. It looked like some kind of jammer. My mind flashed back to Brian and Devlin. The maintenance, the nervous chatter, the sweat. Something was happening, and I'd walked right into a trap. I tried my personal cell phone, but, as expected, there was no signal inside the elevator shaft. I had to think. If this was intentional, what was the purpose? What was happening at the mall today besides the opening? The grand. At my watch, 9:45 a.m., the mall would open in 15 minutes, and the grand opening ceremony was scheduled for 10:30 a.m. I needed to get out of there, and fast. I assessed my options. The elevator ceiling had an emergency hatch, but it was sealed from the inside. Another sign someone had set this trap. The doors were firmly shut, resisting when I tried to pry them open manually. That's when an idea struck me. The elevator had a control panel protected by a cover at the bottom of the main panel, a feature I only knew about because my cousin worked in elevator maintenance and had shown it to me once. If I could access it, maybe I could reset the system. I knelt down and found the small lid. It was locked, but nothing my basic toolkit couldn't fix. It took a few tense minutes, but I finally managed to open it. Inside was a complex array of wires and switches. I tried to remember what my cousin had explained to me. Red for main power, blue for communication, yellow for motor control. Carefully, I turned the red system off and back on. Nothing happened. I tried the yellow button. The lights flickered for a moment, but the elevator remained. Then I noticed a small green switch at the back, almost hidden. Auxiliary security system, the faded label read. It was my last hope. I flipped the switch. To my relief, the elevator shuddered slightly and the main lights came back on. The control panel restarted, blinking several times before stabilizing. The communication system emitted a high-pitched beep. Elevator 5, system reboot. Status: emergency. Initiate evacuation protocol? A computerized voice rang out over the speaker. Yes, I replied quickly. Begin evacuation. Evacuation protocol initiated. Elevator descending to nearest floor. I felt the elevator move slowly downward, finally stopping on the 9th floor. The doors opened partially enough for me to pass through, but there was clearly still a mechanical problem. I quickly left and immediately tried my radio again. This time it worked. Emergency, this is Officer Sullivan. I need to speak with Captain Sullivan immediately. My father's voice answered almost instantly. Sullivan here. What's the situation? In a few quick, precise sentences, I recounted my suspicions. The suspicious maintenance, the conversation between Brian and Devlin, the device in the elevator, my theory about a possible attack during the inauguration. There was a moment of silence. I feared he'd dismiss my concerns as newbie paranoia, but then ... understood. I'm sending teams to locate Devlin and the technician immediately. Go down to the ground floor via the emergency stairs. Meet me at the security center. And Amanda? Good work. On my way, sir. I felt a brief moment of pride before the urgency of the situation brought me back to reality. I located the emergency stairs and began descending quickly, passing confused employees who were beginning to notice something was wrong. On the 5th floor, I encountered 2 police officers coming back up, sent by my father. The captain is coordinating an operation on the ground floor. One of them informed me. The entire mall is being silently evacuated. When I finally reached the ground floor, the scene was one of controlled efficiency. People were being calmly directed toward the exit without panic. Officers in civilian clothes mingled with the crowd, observing, looking for anything suspicious. I found my father at the security center, surrounded by monitors showing every corner of the mall. He was talking to the head of the bomb disposal unit. Sullivan, report, he said as soon as he saw me without showing any sentimentality. No sign of Devlin or Brian during my descent, sir. Elevator 5 was clearly sabotaged with a jamming device that prevented communication and control. He nodded. Good observation. We spotted Brian trying to leave through a service entrance. He's being questioned now. As for Devlin, he pointed to one of the monitors. He's not the real CEO. The real Marcus Devlin was found tied up in his office on the 10th floor. This imposter has disappeared, but we've sealed off all exits. What's the plan now, sir? I asked, trying to keep my voice professional despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. My father studied me for a moment, and then did something that surprised. He turned to the head of the bomb disposal unit and said, Officer Sullivan led the discovery of this operation. Let her lead the search for the suspect. The unit chief, a man I knew only by his stern reputation, raised his eyebrows. Are you sure, Captain? She's single quotes S ... double quotes a trained police officer who proved her worth today. My father finished firmly. My father scoffed. Let the rookie on mall patrol. Then the elevator got stuck on the 13th floor, and I coordinated the rescue. It was the first time he had publicly acknowledged my competence. I swallowed the lump in my throat and stood in front of the monitors. Okay, let's divide them all into quadrants, I began, pointing to the digital map. Based on the latest footage, the suspect was wearing a navy blue blazer and may have attempted to alter his appearance. Let's focus on the restrooms, locker rooms, and service areas first. Security is visual location, not approach. He may be armed. The next 2 hours were intense. I coordinated the search teams while the bomb disposal unit scoured the building for explosives. The mall had been completely evacuated and a security perimeter had been established around the block. It was a young officer in his first week who finally located our suspect. He had hidden in a basement ventilation shaft, trying to wait for the situation to calm down. When he was captured, he was carrying false documents, several cell phones, and a detailed plan of the mall. We would later discover that he was part of an extremist group planning to attack the inauguration ceremony, specifically targeting Mayor. Explosives had been planted at strategic points, including under the main stage, all of which were defused in time thanks to our operation. When the day finally ended, I was exhausted, but proud. My father found me in the police station break room, enjoying some much-needed coffee. Officer Sullivan. He sat down beside me, holding his own cup. For a moment, we were silent. "You did a good job today," he finally said, looking down at his coffee instead of at me. "Your instinct was correct. Your response was appropriate. Your leadership was impressive." "Thank you, sir," I replied, trying not to show how much those words meant to me. He took a sip of coffee and then, to my surprise, he smiled. A genuine smile he rarely showed at work. "When I told you to let the rookie lead back then at the mall, part of me was testing you, hoping you'd prove what I already knew." He looked at me directly. "That you're not just my daughter. You're a real cop, Amanda. A good one." I felt my eyes fill with tears, but I held them back. "I learned from the best, Dad." He nodded, a small gesture that carried decades of paternal pride. Then, returning to his professional tone, he added, "Now go home and rest. Tomorrow the chief wants to see us at 9 a.m. to discuss the official report." "Yes, sir," I replied, hiding a smile. As we walked out of the police station together that night, under the dark Boston sky dotted with stars, I realized that today had been more than just my first big case. It had been my true test of initiation, not as James Sullivan's daughter, but as Officer Amanda Sullivan, a police officer in her own right, and I had passed. The elevator that got stuck on the 13th floor could have been the end of me, but instead, it became the beginning of my true career. Sometimes, I think about that moment when I had to decide between panic or action, between being a victim or a savior. The choice I made in that elevator defined who I truly am. In the following days, the story was all over the newspapers. "Terrorist attack foiled by rookie cop," read the Boston Globe headline. There were interviews, congratulations, even a ceremony where the mayor presented me with a medal for bravery. But none of that compared to that simple moment over coffee with my father, when I finally saw in his eyes what I had always sought: respect as an equal. It's been 5 years since that day. Today, I'm a detective, following in my father's footsteps in a way I never imagined. The Prudential Center is still there, imposing as ever, and I'm occasionally called upon to oversee security at important events. Every time I step into that particular elevator, yes, the same one, now completely renovated, I feel a shiver run down my spine, not from fear, but from memory. It was there, trapped between floors, that I discovered what I'm truly made of. And when the newbies under my command seem nervous or unsure, I sometimes tell this story, not to brag, but to remind them that we all have a defining moment, a metaphorical elevator that stops abruptly, forcing us to decide who we want to be. "Let the new girl lead," my father had said that day, disdain in his voice. Little did he know he was giving me exactly the opportunity I needed to prove myself, not just to him, but to myself. Sometimes, when we're having family dinner, and my dad's in a good mood, he'll raise his glass and say, "To the rookie who led," and everyone laughs, because they know the story. You know, I was never called rookie again after that day. Today, when I look at my badge, I don't just see a symbol of authority. I see a reminder that sometimes the scariest moments in our lives are gateways to our true strength, that a stalled elevator can be the beginning of an upward journey, and that, in the end, it doesn't matter whose children we are. What matters is who we choose to be when the doors close and we are alone with our fears and our courage. My name is Detective Amanda Sullivan, and this is the story of how a stalled elevator on the 13th floor changed my life forever. In the weeks following the Prudential Center incident, my life changed in ways I never could have anticipated. The Boston Police Department became a whirlwind of activity, with endless interrogations, meetings with the FBI, and press conference. The suspect we captured, who we later learned was Ethan Winters, was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Winters was a former military man with explosives training and ties to a domestic extremist group called the Sons of True Liberty. The group had been on the FBI's watch list for years, but had never attempted anything as ambitious as a mass shooting in broad daylight. During interrogations, we discovered that the plan was far more complex than we initially imagined. The mall explosion was only the first act in a series of coordinated attacks across the city. Teams were positioned near hospitals, waiting to attack ambulances transporting the injured. A veritable layered nightmare that, thanks to the intuition of a rookie trapped in an elevator, never came to fruition. Didn't take long for the press to discover that the Prudential heroine was the daughter of the legendary Captain Sullivan. Reporters began showing up everywhere on my doorstep, at the coffee shop I frequented, even approaching my mother at the supermarket. "What's it like to be raised by a hero?" they'd ask. "Have you always wanted to follow in your father's footsteps?" The headlines ranged from flattering to sensational, like Father, like Daughter, or Sullivan Police Dynasty saves Boston again. I confess that all this attention deeply bothered me. I had become a police officer to make a difference, not to be a celebrity. My father, accustomed to the press after decades of service, gave me some valuable advice over a family dinner. "Mandy," he said, using the nickname he only used at home, "fame is like a Boston blizzard intense. Blinds everyone for a while, but eventually passes. Keep doing your job, and in a they'll find another story." But this particular storm was slow to pass. The foiled Prudential Center bombing proved to be the largest domestic terrorist plot uncovered in Massachusetts in the past decade. Each new detail that emerged during the investigation fueled another news cycle. The darkest moment came when an investigative journalist from the Boston Herald published an article questioning whether I had actually uncovered the plot on my own. He insinuated that my father had orchestrated the whole thing to give me a chance to shine, citing anonymous sources within the department. The suggestion that my moment of courage had been manufactured by nepotism burned like acid. That night, I broke my own rule of never drinking during the week and opened a bottle of cheap whiskey I kept stashed away for emotional emergencies. Sitting alone in my small Dorchester apartment, with the rain beating against the windows, I wondered if it would always be like this, if my every achievement would be forever overshadowed by my father's shadow. The phone rang around 10 p.m. It was Melissa Chun, sister of Mark, Prudential's head of security. She was also a police officer working in the cybercrimes and had become a close friend since the incident. "Have you seen the mayor's comment on that ridiculous article?" she asked without even saying hello. "I'm not following anything today," I replied, my voice slightly slurred by the whiskey. "I'm having a very productive evening of self-pity here." She laughed. "Well, stop this important work and turn on the TV. Channel 5. Reluctantly, I picked up the remote and tuned to the indicated channel. Boston Mayor Robert Callahan, the same man I had inadvertently saved, was in the middle of a press conference. "I want to make something absolutely clear," he said, his usually diplomatic face now serious and determined. "The insinuations published today about Officer Amanda Sullivan are not only false, but deeply offensive to all the men and women of the police force who risk their lives daily. I was there that day. I saw with my own eyes the professional operation she coordinated, and as additional information I can reveal now that the investigation has progressed. We have security footage showing the exact moment Officer Sullivan identified the device in the elevator and worked under extreme pressure to overcome it. Anyone who questions her heroism or competence should be ashamed. Melissa let out a triumphant cry on the other end of the line. See? Even the damn mayor is defending you. I stared at the screen, speechless. A strange feeling spread through my chest. Not exactly, but something deeper. Validation, perhaps. My brother also spoke to the Boston Globe. Melissa, they're running a profile on you tomorrow, telling how you questioned the technicians before you even got trapped in the elevator. Mark says you demonstrated more police instincts in 5 minutes than many veterans do in their entire careers. He exaggerates. I muttered, but I felt my mood gradually improve. Just accept it, Sullivan. You're legitimately good at what you do. Your father's shadow is large, but you're creating your own light. Those words stayed with me in the days that followed. Creating your own light. It was exactly what I needed to do. A week later, I was summoned to the police commissioner's office. My father was there, along with Sergeant Dawson and a few other high-ranking officers I recognized only from departmental. Officer Sullivan, Commissioner Gardner began, his tone formal, but his eyes warm. The events at the Prudential Center demonstrated not only your courage, but your ability to think critically under extreme pressure. These are qualities we can't teach. You either have them or you don't. He paused, looking at my father for a moment before continuing. Normally, newly minted officers spend at least 2 years on patrol before being considered for any special. However, extraordinary circumstances warrant extraordinary measures. We are forming a new task force focused on domestic terrorist threats, in conjunction with the FBI, and we'd like you to join the team. I looked at my father, unable to hide my surprise. His face remained professional, but I noticed a slight twitch at the corner of his mouth, that half-smile he rarely showed at work. Sir, I'm honored, I finally managed, but I have less than 6 months of experience. There are many more qualified officers, double quotes. The commissioner held up a hand, interrupting me. Sometimes, Officer Sullivan, what we need isn't experience, but a fresh perspective. Your academic background in criminal psychology, combined with what you've demonstrated in the field, suggests you have much to contribute. Besides, he smiled slightly, after what you faced at Prudential, I think challenges are something you seek, not avoid. It was true. Ever since the incident, regular patrols had felt boring. Every time I climbed into a patrol car for another round of the neighborhood, part of me longed for the adrenaline rush of those 2 hours coordinating the search for Winters. The task force will be led by FBI's Special Agent Marcus Rivera, the commissioner continued. You will report directly to him, not to the department's normal chain of command. Not to my father, he was saying. This would be my chance to work completely outside of Captain Sullivan's shadow. When do I start? The commissioner smiled, clearly pleased with my answer. Monday, 8 a.m., Federal Office, 10th floor. When we left the meeting, my father pulled me into a side hallway, out of earshot of the others. You don't have to accept if you don't want to, Amanda, he said, his voice softer than usual. Task forces can be politically complicated, especially with the FBI involved. And Rivera has a reputation. What kind of a reputation? I asked, curious about his hesitation. He's brilliant, there's no doubt about that. Perhaps the best behavioral analyst the Boston office has ever had. But he's demanding, relentless when it comes to results. And not always, diplomatic. I smiled, recognizing the irony. That reminds me of someone I know. My father raised his eyebrows. I'm perfectly diplomatic. Dad, you made a newbie cry last year because he filed a report in the wrong folder. That report contained vital information for a homicide investigation. He protested, but there was a glint in his eye. Okay, I get your point. I'm just saying you'll have new challenges, and I won't be there to help. Maybe that's just what I need, I replied softly. He studied me for a long moment before nodding slowly. Maybe so. The Sunday before my first day on the task force, I went to my parents' house for dinner, as I had done almost every Sunday since moving into my own apartment. My mother, Elena, a high school history teacher with Puerto Rican roots, had prepared my favorite disheras con ganjels, anchovy stew, and roasted pernil pork roast. Food was always her way of showing love, especially during important moments. So, she said as she served a generous portion onto my plate, tomorrow's the big day. It's just a new position. Mom, I replied, trying to downplay it to control my own nervousness. It's not like I'm being promoted to commissioner. Still, my father muttered behind his glass of red wine, making me roll my eyes. James, don't put any more pressure on her. My mother scolded him gently. Then, turning to me, we're proud of you, little girl. You've earned this on your own merit. Not everyone thinks so, I commented, thinking of the insinuations still circulating in the department. My father set his glass down with more force than necessary. Those who matter know the truth. The rest. He waved his hand dismissively. Your father's right, my mother. Something rare enough to make us both look at her in surprise. She smiled. Yes, sometimes he's right. Like when he said you were born to be a cop? Even when I expected you to pursue academia, you wanted me to be a teacher like you, I remembered, smiling. I wanted you to be happy, she corrected. And you have that fire in your eyes when you talk about your work, the same fire your father has. Some people are born with it. After dinner, while helping my mother wash the dishes, a family tradition, she brought up a subject she had avoided since the incident. Do you still have the nightmares? I paused, the sponge poised over a plate. I hadn't told many people about the nightmares that began after the Prudential Center. Vivid dreams of the elevator crashing, of explosions devastating the mall, of me failing instead of succeeding. My mother, with her maternal sixth sense, had noticed the dark circles under my eyes at lunch and gently pressed me until I confessed. Less often, I replied honestly. But yes, they still happen sometimes. She nodded, methodically drying a glass. It's normal, you know. Your dad had his after that bank shooting in 2015. He won't admit it. Of course, but I'd hear him pacing around the house at 3 in the morning. This was new information. My father, the unbreakable Captain Sullivan, having nightmares? How did he handle it? I asked curiously. His way. He worked harder. He spent more time at the shooting range. He reviewed the standard operating procedure for hostage situations about 50. She smiled fondly. But he also started taking care of those plants of his. He said there was something therapeutic about caring for living beings who couldn't shoot him. I laughed, imagining my tough-as-nails dad talking to his succulent. The backyard garden had become his refuge in recent years, something I'd always attributed to him getting older. I'd never connected it to the trauma. What I'm saying, Amanda, is that you need to find your own garden, somewhere or something that's just yours, away from work. Balance the chaos with peace. Her words resonated with me as I drove back to my apartment that night. What would my garden be? What space could I create that was completely my own, untainted by the Sullivan legacy or the department's expectations? The answer came unexpectedly the next morning, when I came across a flyer in the elevator of the federal building. Kickboxing classes. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 7 p.m., Gold's Gym. Something about the image of a woman wearing boxing gloves, her face determined and powerful, caught my eye. I ripped off the flyer and put it in my pocket. The 10th floor of the federal building was a maze of narrow corridors and glass-walled meeting rooms. I followed the directions to a door marked simply Room 1520. Inside, I found what appeared to be a miniature operations center. Whiteboards covered with photos, maps, and diagrams, desks with state-of-the-art computers, and a half-dozen people working with focused intensity. A tall man, with dark skin and closely cropped hair, looked up from a filing cabinet as I entered. He wore an impeccable suit that looked far too expensive for a federal agent's salary. Officer Sullivan, I presume? He didn't smile, but he extended his hand. Special Agent Marcus Rivera. Welcome to Operation Hydra. His handshake was firm and dry, his eyes assessing. Hydra? I asked, matching his formality. Like, the mythical creature cut off one head, 2 grow in its place. He pointed to the central board, where photos of several suspects, including Ethan Winters, were connected by red lines. We arrested Winters, but the Sons of True Liberty is an organization with independent chapters throughout the Northeast. The Prudential attack was just the beginning. He led me around the room, quickly introducing me to the other team members, 2 FBI agents, an ATF explosives expert, a Homeland Security analyst, and a Massachusetts State Police detective. I was by far the youngest and most inexperienced person in the room. Why am I here? I asked when we finished the tour, quietly enough for only Rivera to hear. Really, no official version. He studied me for a moment before responding in the same low tone. Because you saw something everyone else missed. Because you didn't hesitate when you encountered a problem. Because you improvised a solution when there was no procedure to follow. Paused. And frankly, because we need someone who doesn't think the way we all do. We've been chasing these cells for years with limited results. Clearly, our traditional methods aren't working. It wasn't the answer I expected, but it was one I could respect. Rivera wasn't interested in public relations or using me as a symbol. He genuinely believed I could contribute. So, where do we start? I asked, feeling the familiar adrenaline starting to course through my veins. He smiled for the first time, a smile as sharp as a knife's blade. We start by finding out who Ethan Winters really is, because we believe the man we have in custody is not who he says he is. The following week were the most intense and intellectually stimulating of my life. The task force worked at a relentless pace, chasing leads, analyzing patterns, building psychological profiles of known members of the Sons of True Liberty. Rivera proved to be exactly as my father had described, brilliant and demanding in equal parts. He had a unique way of dissecting human behavior, finding patterns where others saw only chaos. And what about Ethan Winters? Rivera was right. The man had provided impeccable documentation proving his identity, but small inconsistencies began to appear, hesitations when answering questions about his childhood, an accent that occasionally slipped into something else, technical knowledge that didn't match his alleged military background. It was during a particularly tense interview, when Rivera was pressing Winters about discrepancies in his service record, that I noticed something strange. Winters was sitting with his hands cuffed to the table, seemingly calm, but his feet were tapping a rhythmic pattern on the floor. It wasn't random nervousness, but something deliberate. 3 short taps, 3 long taps, 3 short taps again. SOS in Morse code. Rivera had allowed me to observe the interrogation from an adjacent room with monitors. When he left for a break, I shared my observation. "Do you think he's trying to send a message?" Rivera asked, intrigued. "Or maybe?" I hesitated, the theory forming in my mind as I spoke. What if he's not a willing perpetrator? What if he's a victim too? Someone forced to participate? Rivera considered the possibility, his dark eyes calculating quickly. A human bomb. Someone coerced, perhaps through threats to their family. He shook his head. "It's a strategy we've seen with international terrorist groups, but rarely with domestic extremists. It would completely change our understanding of the organization." That theory opened a new line of investigation. Instead of pressing Winters as a hardened perpetrator, we began treating him as a potential victim. This shift in approach yielded surprising results. Winters, whose real name we learned was Craig Holden, had been a college engineering professor whose teenage daughter had been kidnapped by the group. They threatened to kill her unless he used his expertise to help them. What initially appeared to be a group of amateur extremists turned out to be a sophisticated operation with substantial resources and a network of coerced individuals. It was my first important lesson from Rivera. Sometimes the line between victims and perpetrators is much thinner than it seems, and often the key to solving a case lies not in the obvious, major evidence, but in the small details most people would overlook, like a foot-tapping pattern. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, I found myself thriving under Rivera's demanding guidance. During the day, we hunted domestic terrorists with an almost obsessive intensity. At night, I channeled my residual energy into the kickboxing classes I had begun attending, finding a strange peace in the methodical rhythm of the strikes, in the satisfying ache of muscles worked to their limit. At home, the nightmares gradually gave way to dreams of but now, instead of being the prey trapped in an elevator, I was the hunter, following clues, connecting the dots, closing in. My mother was right. I needed my own garden, and I had found it in both the mental intensity of the task force and the physical release of the boxing ring. 6 months after joining Operation Hydra, we achieved our first major victory. Based on information meticulously gleaned from hundreds of hours of interrogation with Holden, electronic intercepts, and physical surveillance, we were able to, simultaneously, identify and arrest members of 3 different Sons of True Liberty cells in Boston, Providence, and Portland. It was the largest coordinated operation I had ever participated in, involving over 100 federal agents and state police. I remained alongside Rivera in the command center, helping coordinate the tactical teams as they converged on the targets. When the dust settled, we had 17 suspects in custody, and most importantly, we had recovered Holden's daughter alive, having been held captive for nearly a year. The image of Emily, the girl, reuniting with her father at FBI headquarters will stay with me forever. They were both crying, clinging to each other, as if afraid the other would disappear if they let go. It was a powerful reminder of why we did this work, not for the accolades or the headlines, but for the healing moments we were sometimes privileged to witness. That night, the entire team gathered at a bar near the office to celebrate. It was the first time I saw Rivera truly relaxed, his tie loosened, a rare smile softening his normally stern features as he toasted the team's success. "A special toast," he said, raising his glass to Officer Sullivan, whose observation about Morse code opened this entire investigation. "One day, when you're running your own task force, remember to look for your own rookie cop with fresh eyes." I felt my face flush at the unexpected compliment. "Thank you," I managed, "but I still have a lot to learn." "We always do," Rivera replied enigmatically. "It's what keeps us alive in this work." Later that night, as I was about to leave, Rivera handed me an envelope. "What is this?" I asked, confused. "Your official transfer." He smiled at my surprised expression. "Starting tomorrow, you are no longer Officer Sullivan on loan to the Federal Task Force. You are officially Detective Sullivan, permanently assigned to Operation Hydra." I stared at the envelope, stunned. A promotion to detective usually took years, not months. "How?" "Your work spoke for itself," Rivera said simply. "Commissioner Gardner approved it, as did my superiors at the Bureau." "You deserved it, Sullivan." He paused. "And your father had nothing to do with it, if that's what you're thinking." In fact, he recused himself from the vote to avoid any appearance of favoritism. That sounded exactly like something my father would do. Always strictly ethical, even when it could have benefited me. "Thank you," she said, this time with more conviction. "I won't let you down." Rivera nodded. "I know you don't." Then, with a small smile, "Now go home, detective. We have a lot of work to do tomorrow." I left the bar that night feeling like I was floating, the envelope safely tucked into my purse. The city lights of Boston twinkled against the night sky like stars within my reach. I picked up my phone and called my dad. He answered on the second ring. "Amanda? Is everything okay?" "Everything's great, Dad," I replied, unable to keep the smile from my voice. "I guess you'll have to call me Detective Sullivan from now on." There was a moment of silence, and then I heard something I rarely heard my father laughing, a deep, genuine sound of pure joy. "It's about time," he said finally. "Your mother is making Era's Kangangels to celebrate tomorrow. Don't be late." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I promised. As I put away my phone, I stood for a moment on the sidewalk, staring up at the federal building where it had all begun 6 months ago. I thought of the scared newbie I was, trapped in that elevator on the 13th floor of the Prudential Center, forced to rely solely on my instincts and training. That elevator had been both a trap and an opportunity, the moment that defined not only my career, but who I would become. And though I couldn't have known then what the future held, I understood that experience had prepared me for the challenges to come. "Let the new girl lead," my father had said that day, disdain in his voice. Who would have thought those words would become prophetic? Because now I was leading, no longer following in my father's footsteps, but forging my own path. A path illuminated not by his shadow, but by my own light. My name is Detective Amanda Sullivan, and this is the story of how a stalled elevator on the 13th floor led me to uncover not only a terrorist plot, but also the woman I could become when I faced my fears and trusted my instincts. And this story, I realize now, is just beginning.